The orc girl was not waiting to be rescued.
I do not know
She was
you.
waiting to
I
be
am Tavren.
killed.
Just let me
Tavren
see.
found her chained
What do you
beneath
want?
Rootfall's dead
Stop the
warning
bleeding.
tunnels, where no prisoner was supposed to survive. Iron cuffs bit deep into her wrists. Her parrot-green skin was marked with burns. Her sharp tusks were clenched in pain.
You will not
But
break
one
me.
tusk was not bone. It was gold. The moment Tavren's lantern touched it, every war bell in the underground city screamed at once. Above him, soldiers shouted. Below him, something ancient moved inside the stone. The chained orc lifted her eyes and warned him not to come closer. Not because she feared him, but because the chains were listening. Then Tavren saw the carvings on the wall behind her, humans and orcs standing together, not as enemies but as allies. For 100 years, both sides had been told the war began with orc betrayal, but the golden tusk was humming a different truth. And before Tavren could break the first lock, the tunnel door slammed shut behind him. The sound of the sealed door hit Tavren harder than a blade. He spun toward it, lantern shaking in his fist. The old iron hatch had locked itself from the outside. No handle, no keyhole. Only a black symbol burned across the metal like fresh coal. Tavren knew that mark. Every child in Rootfall knew it from war posters and execution boards. The Ash Synod, a name whispered beneath doors. Her name blamed for disappearances, false alarms and tunnels that collapsed only after witnesses entered them. Behind him, the chained orc girl dragged in a breath. Now you are trapped too. Her voice was rough, young and tired. Not the voice of a monster. Not the voice Tavren had heard in soldier stories. He looked back at her, and the glow from his lantern caught the gold of her tusk again. The whole chamber answered with a low hum, as if the walls had been waiting years to hear it. Tavren forced himself to move. He was no warrior. He was only a resonance mender, a poor bell repairman who lived above a cracked forge and slept beside coils of wire, broken clappers, and unpaid city notices. His hands were made for tuning metal, not saving prisoners. His coat was patched at the elbows. His boots leaked tunnel water. In Rootfall, men like him fixed warning. Bells while richer men gave orders, and soldiers took glory, but he understood one thing better than any commander. Sound never lied, and the sound coming from those chains was wrong. Crouched near the nearest cuff, careful not to touch her skin. The chains were not simple iron. Thin crystal veins ran through them, glowing faintly blue whenever Zhara moved. Tavren lifted a small tuning fork from his belt and struck it gently against his lantern frame. The note rang softly. The chain snapped tight. Zhara hissed in pain and jerked back, her sharp tusks flashing. Stop. Tavren dropped the fork at once. I didn't know. You humans never know, she said, eyes burning. You build cages, then act surprised when they hurt. The words struck him, but he did not answer with anger. Above the chamber, boots pounded through the tunnels. Men shouted his name. Someone had followed him down here. Maybe the city guard, maybe worse. Tavren pulled a water flask from his satchel and rolled it across the wet stone toward her. Zhara stared at it like it was a trick. If I wanted you dead, Tavren said quietly, I would have left when the bells started screaming. She did not drink, not yet. But her eyes shifted from his face to his scarred hands, to his cheap tools, to the patched sleeve of a man too poor to be anyone's commander. Then the golden tusk pulsed once. The carvings behind her brightened. Human hands. Orc tusks, a bell between them, and from the other side of the sealed door a cold voice said, Open the chamber, Tavren Alt, or we burn the whole tunnel down. Tavren's mouth went dry. The voice beyond the iron hatch was calm, almost bored. That made it worse. Soldiers shouted. Boots scraped stone. But the man who had spoken sounded like he had already decided how this would end. Zhara's chains tightened again, reacting to the fear in the room. Blue crystal veins burned brighter around her wrists. She clenched her jaw, refusing to cry out, but Tavren saw the pain ripple through her shoulders. Who is that? He whispered. Zhara's eyes stayed on the door. Not your guard, the voice returned. You found property of the Ash Synod. Step away from the orc and you may still walk out. Tavren looked at her. Property? Her upper lip curled, exposing both tusks. One bone white, one impossible gold. That is what they call anything they cannot kill yet. A sharp metallic click echoed from the other side of the hatch. Tavren knew that sound too well. A pressure torch. They were cutting through the lock. He grabbed his lantern and searched the chamber walls. Rootfall's old tunnels had been built by bell-makers generations before the war. Every warning chamber had a second path, a narrow release crawl made for repair workers in case of cave-ins. Tavren found it behind a curtain of mineral roots, half buried under fallen stone. Too small for Zhara while she was chained. He turned back, mind racing. "If I loosen one cuff, can you move? If you touch the wrong note, these chains will cut to bone. Then tell me the right one." Zhara stared at him as if he had spoken nonsense. "You would trust an orc prisoner?" "No," Tavren said, pulling 3 tuning forks from his belt. "I'm trusting the chain." For the first time, confusion broke through her anger. Tavren knelt near the cuff again, not close enough to threaten her. He listened, not with his ears only, but through the floor, through the lantern frame, through the tiny tremors in his fingertips. The chain gave off a thin, cruel sound almost too high to hear. It was not made to hold strength. It was made to punish resistance. Above them, the cutting torch screamed. Orange light began to leak around the hatch. "Hurry," Zhara said. "I need silence." She gave a bitter laugh. "Then choose a different war." Tavren struck the smallest fork against his boot heel. The note trembled through the chamber. The cuff tightened. Zhara's breath broke, but Tavren caught the mistake before it crushed her wrist. He pressed the fork against the stone floor, smothering the vibration. "Wrong," he whispered. "Brilliant observation." He ignored the insult and chose the second fork. This one rang lower, warmer. The chain's blue glow flickered. Zhara went still. Again, Tavren struck it. The cuff loosened a finger's width. Zhara's eyes widened. The torch outside burned hotter. A strip of iron peeled away from the hatch. "Again," she said. Tavren hit the note a 3rd time, then a 4th. Sweat slid down his temple. The sound had to be exact each time. Too sharp and the chain would bite. Too soft and the lock would reset. The cuff opened. Zhara's right arm fell free. She moved so fast, Tavren barely saw it. In one breath, she seized the loosened chain, wrapped it around her forearm, and yanked hard. The entire pillar cracked. Tavren stumbled back, expecting her to strike him next. She did not. Instead, Zhara caught him by the back of his patched coat and pulled him away just as a blade of heated metal punched through the hatch. The burning point struck the place where Tavren's head had been. For one suspended second, they stared at each other. Her hand was still gripping his coat. His lantern was still shaking. Her golden tusk glowed so brightly, it painted his face in warm light. Then she released him. "You are slow," she said. "You're welcome," he managed. "I saved you." Opened the cuff. One cuff. The hatch groaned as the men outside forced it wider. Tavren ran to the escape crawl and kicked loose the stones blocking it. "Can you break the rest?" Zhara grabbed the chain running from her left wrist to the pillar. Her muscles tightened under bruised parrot-green skin. The crystal veins flared blue, then white. Pain twisted across her face, but she pulled again. Stone cracked. Dust fell from the ceiling. The chain did not break. Tavren heard the problem instantly. "It's anchored by a counternote." "What does that mean?" "It means they built the lock to resist your strength." Zhara looked toward the hatch, where a masked figure now stood behind the widening cut. Its face was covered in black metal, and its robes were stitched with silver sound runes. "They built it from my blood," she said. The words hit Tavren like cold water. He wanted to ask what she meant, but there was no time. He ripped a bronze bell clapper from his satchel and wedged it between 2 crystal links. "On my signal," he said. "Pull." Zhara glared. "Human, my name is Tavren." The smallest pause passed between them. Then she said, "Zhara." The masked man outside raised his hand. "Take them both." Tavren struck the bell clapper with his hammer. The chamber exploded with sound. Zhara pulled. The chain shattered into blue sparks. Tavren grabbed his lantern. Zhara grabbed him by the arm, not gently but not cruelly either. And together they ran toward the crawl space as the hatch burst open behind them. They squeezed into the narrow passage while heat and shouting filled the prison chamber. Tavren crawled first, scraping his elbows raw on crystal rock. Zhara followed close behind, dragging broken chains that hissed against the stone. Halfway through, the tunnel split into 3 black mouths. Tavren froze. He had repaired maps of these passages but never walked them. One led back toward Rootfall. One dropped into old mines. The third had been sealed for a reason no record explained. Behind them, the masked pursuers entered the crawl space. Zhara leaned close, her breath ragged near his ear. "The left tunnel smells like soldiers," she said. "The middle smells like death." Tavren looked at the third tunnel. From deep inside it came a faint bell note, answering the hum of her golden tusk. "And that one?" he asked. Zhara's expression changed. For the first time she looked afraid. "That one," she whispered, "is where they made me." Tavren stared into the third tunnel. The faint bell note came again, soft, buried, alive. It passed through the stone under his palms and climbed into his teeth. Zhara's golden tusk answered with a low shimmer, and the broken chains around her wrists trembled like frightened snakes. Behind them, the masked pursuers scraped closer through the crawl space. "Move," Zhara said. Tavren did not argue. He plunged into the third tunnel. The passage dropped steeply, forcing them to slide through wet crystal dust. Sharp roots scraped Tavren's shoulders. His lantern slammed against the wall, throwing wild light over ancient symbols carved into the stone. Not human letters, not orc marks. Something older. Zhara followed with difficulty. She was strong but wounded. Every few feet her broken chains caught on the rocks, and each tug sent pain across her face. Tavren slowed once to help her, but she snapped, "Do not pity me." "I'm not," he said. "I'm tired of listening to you drag half a prison behind you." That surprised a breath of laughter out of her. It was brief, rough, almost unwilling. Then the sound vanished as screams echoed behind them. Not human screams. The pursuers had entered the third tunnel, and something in the dark had noticed. Tavren stopped. Zhara grabbed his collar and pulled him forward. "Do not listen." "What was that?" "The tunnel remembering them." He wanted to ask what that meant, but the passage opened before he could speak. They emerged into a massive, hidden chamber beneath Rootfall. Tavren's lantern became useless there. Light came from thousands of hanging crystal roots, glowing green, blue, and pale gold. The floor was flooded with black water so still it looked like polished glass. In the center stood a circular platform surrounded by broken pillars, and on every pillar was the same symbol Tavren had seen behind Zhara in the prison chamber. Human hands. Orc tusks. A bell between them. Tavren stepped onto the platform slowly. This place was built by both sides. Zhara's face tightened, before both sides forgot. She moved to the nearest pillar and pressed her fingers against the carvings. Her golden tusk glowed brighter. A thin line of light ran from the tusk into the stone, and suddenly the chamber filled with voices. Not ghosts. Memories. A human woman's voice spoke first, clear and trembling. "Let this accord carry longer than blood," an orc man answered, deep and proud. "Let no child inherit a war they did not choose." Tavren's throat tightened. All his life he had been told orcs began the war by slaughtering human envoys in the lower tunnels. He had seen the murals in Rootfall, tusks red with blood, humans begging. Bells shattered under orc axes, but these voices did not sound like enemies. Zhara turned away from the pillar. "Jaw hard, you knew this," Tavren said. "I knew pieces. Then why did they chain you?" She looked at him, and in the green-gold light she seemed less like a prisoner, and more like someone carrying a punishment too old for one body. "Because my tusk remembers the last peace note," she said. The Sun-Tusk accord was not written on paper. Paper burns, stone breaks. So they bound the final sound into a living bloodline. Your bloodline. My mother's, her mother's, every golden tusk bearer before me. Her voice lowered. When the note is sung in the first bell chamber, every false war record cracks open. Every hidden engine feeding on hatred goes silent. Tavren looked around at the pillars, at the water, at the glowing roots. "Then you can end the war." Zhara's mouth twisted. "That is why everyone wants me dead." A heavy splash sounded across the chamber. Both of them turned. Mirel Quen, Tavren's young lamp-runner assistant, stumbled from another tunnel mouth, soaked, terrified, and holding a small glow lantern. Her face went white when she saw Zhara. "Tavren," she whispered. "The whole city is hunting you." Tavren rushed to her. "How did you find us?" "I followed the bell echoes." Mirel's eyes flicked to Zhara's tusks, then to the broken chains. "Marshal Vask says you helped an orc assassin escape. He says she killed peace envoys. He says anyone hiding you will hang from the root bridges." Zhara made a bitter sound. "Convenient." Mirel backed away. "Is it true?" Tavren did not answer quickly enough. Zhara stepped forward and Mirel flinched. The reaction cut across Zhara's face before she could hide it. "I was there," Zhara said. "At the envoy meeting. I was a child. I watched masked priests enter after the oath song began. They carried weapons that made no sound until people started dying. The chamber grew colder. Tavren remembered the Ash Synod mark on the sealed door, the pressure torch, the tuned chains, the cold voice calling Zhara property. "They started it," he said. Zhara nodded. "And they have been feeding it ever since." Before anyone could speak, the black water around the platform began to ripple. A low horn echoed from the far tunnels. Then another orc horns. Zhara stiffened. Mirel gripped Tavren's sleeve. "That isn't the city guard." "No," Zhara whispered. "That is Grandmother Korrasha." Tavren heard stories of that name. The orc elder general who wore enemy bells on her armor. The woman who never accepted surrender, never forgave insult, and never allowed peace talkers to live. Zhara's golden tusk dimmed as fear crossed her face. Tavren saw it and understood. The humans wanted to capture her. The Synod wanted to use her, but her own people had come to silence her. Across the chamber, torches flared red in the tunnel mouths. Orc warriors appeared one by one, tall and armed, their tusks painted with ash. At their center stood an old orc woman in bone armor, her eyes fixed on Zhara's golden tusk. "My lost son-child," Grandmother Korrasha called. "Come home quietly." Her hand closed around a jagged spear. "Or I will break the piece out of your mouth myself." The red torchlight swallowed the green glow of the crystal roots. Tavren stood between Zhara and the orc warriors before he fully understood what he was doing. His hammer was still in his hand, useless against spears, axes, and the old general whose bone armor clicked softly with every breath. Mirel pulled at his sleeve. "Tavren, move." He did not. Grandmother Korrasha's eyes narrowed at him. She was taller than any human soldier Tavren had ever seen. Her parrot-green skin cut with white scars, her lower tusks capped in dark iron. Tiny bells hung from her armor, each one dented, each one taken from a fallen human settlement. They made no music when she walked, only a dead, dry rattle. "A bell-mender," she said with disgust. "The humans send craftsmen now to hide their thieves." Zhara stepped forward, broken chains dragging behind her. "He did not steal me." Korrasha's gaze shifted to her. For 1 second, something almost tender passed across the old orc's face. Then it hardened into command. "You were taken from us. I was taken by the Synod. You were taken because your mother trusted humans." Korrasha struck the butt of her spear against the platform. The sound cracked across the flooded chamber. "That trust murdered half our bloodline." Zhara's golden tusk flickered. The water around the platform began to tremble. Tavren felt the bell note again, deeper now, rising beneath his boots. The chamber was waking. The carved pillars glowed one by one, and the ancient symbols brightened. Human hands, orc tusks, a bell between them. Korrasha saw the light and lifted her spear. "Do not let her sing." The warriors surged. Zhara moved first. Weak as she was, she caught the nearest spear shaft with one hand and snapped it across her knee. Tavren ducked as the broken end spun past his head. Mirel screamed and swung her glow lantern into an orc's face, sending sparks across the platform. But Zhara could not fight them all. A chain wrapped around her ankle from behind. She crashed hard onto the stone. The black water burst upward. From the opposite tunnel, Marshal Vask marched into the chamber with human soldiers in bronze masks. Behind them came the Ash Synod priests, robes stitched in silver runes, their sound blades humming without moving. Tavren's stomach dropped. Both armies had arrived, and both had been led here. Marshal Vask smiled when he saw Tavren. "There you are, Rootfall's loyal little repairman." Tavren gripped his hammer tighter. "You knew about this chamber." "I knew enough." Vask looked at Zhara like she was a weapon, not a person. "And now the orc clans have kindly delivered themselves to the grave with her." Korrasha turned her spear toward him. "Human liar," Vask laughed. "Still blaming humans for every shadow, old mother." "Good. That has always made you useful." The insult struck the chamber harder than a blade. Zhara, still pinned by the chain, looked up sharply. "You worked with them." Vask did not deny it. The Synod priests spread across the edges of the platform, setting black tuning rods into the stone. Each rod began to pulse with a deep red light. The ancient pillars shook. The memory voices that had spoken moments ago twisted into screams. Tavren recognized the sound immediately. It was the same note, hidden in Zhara's chains. "They're corrupting the chamber," he said. Vor the chain priest stepped from behind Vask, his black metal mask reflecting the golden light from Zhara's tusk. "Correct, bell-mender. This place was built to reveal truth. We improved it." The rods pulsed again. The water rose in a perfect circle around the platform, forming a dark mirror. Images appeared inside it. Humans burning orc nests, orcs slaughtering human envoys, children crying beneath broken bells. Korrasha's warriors roared. Vask's soldiers raised their crossbows. Hatred returned to their faces like a curse. Zhara shouted, "Those are fragments." "Not the whole memory." Vor tilted his head. "Fragments are all people need to keep killing." Tavren's mind raced. The Synod had not only hidden the truth, they had learned how to cut it apart, how to feed each side only the wounds that kept them angry. Korrasha stared into the black water, shaking. "I saw my daughter die," Zhara's voice broke. "My mother." For the first time, Tavren understood. Korrasha was not only a general, she was Zhara's grandmother. The old orc looked at the golden tusk, and her iron-capped tusks trembled. "Your mother carried that light. She went to the humans with a peace song. She came back in pieces." "No," Zhara whispered. "She never came back." "That is what they told you." The chamber answered her. Her golden tusk flared so brightly that every false image in the water shattered. Golden light flew into the pillars, and the true memory opened above them. Everyone saw it. A younger Korrasha standing beside a human bellmaster. Zhara's mother between them, her golden tusk glowing as she began the accord song. Human envoys lowering weapons. Orc elders placing tusk marks on stone. Then, masked Synod priests entering through hidden doors. Sound blades. Flashing humans and orcs dying together. The first screams of the war. Korrasha staggered. Back as if struck through the heart. Vask shouted, "Kill the orc girl." Crossbows lifted. Tavren ran toward Zhara. Vor raised one hand and all the broken chains around Zhara snapped upright like living serpents. They wrapped her wrists, throat, and golden tusk, forcing her head back. "The reveal is complete," Vor said coldly. "Now we take the key." The largest tuning rod split open, revealing a curved blade shaped like a bell striker. Tavren reached Zhara just as Vor pointed to her glowing tusk. "Break it from her mouth," the chain priest ordered, "and let the final war begin." Tavren threw himself between the blade and Zhara. The curved striker stopped inches from his chest. For one breath, the whole chamber froze, the orc warriors, the human soldiers, the Synod priests, even Grandmother Korrasha, who stood beneath the golden memory of her daughter's murder, with tears cutting through the ash on her face. Vor's black mask tilted. "Move, bell-mender." Tavren's hands shook around his small hammer. "No," Marshal Vask snarled. "You would die for an orc." Tavren looked back at Zhara. Chains held her throat tight. One iron loop pressed against her golden tusk, forcing her mouth open. Blood ran from the corner of her lip, but her eyes were fixed on him, not with fear now, with warning. "Don't," she rasped. Tavren understood what she meant. He was a poor repairman, a man with patched sleeves, burnt fingers, and no army. If he stood there, Vor would cut him down and take the tusk anyway. But if he moved, the war would never end. Vor raised the striker again. The golden tusk carries the accord note. Once broken, it will become a weapon. We will ring the first bell with hatred instead of peace. Every city above and below will hear only the memories we choose. The black water around the platform rose higher, showing twisted images again. Human children screaming, orc mothers bleeding, soldiers burning tunnels. The armies began to breathe harder. Weapons lifted. Old grief returned to their faces. Zhara fought the chains, but they tightened around her throat. Korrasha took one step forward, then stopped, trapped between rage and shame. "Grandmother," Zhara forced out. The old orc flinched. That single word broke something in her. Korrasha lowered her spear. Vask saw it and shouted, "Cowardly beast!" He grabbed a crossbow from one of his soldiers and fired at Zhara. Tavren moved without thinking. The bolt struck his left hand. Pain exploded up his arm. His hammer fell from his fingers and clanged against the stone. Mirel screamed his name. Tavren dropped to one knee, blood pouring across his palm. Zhara's eyes widened with horror. The golden tusk blazed. "No," she whispered. Then her expression changed. Not panic, not weakness or choice. She bit down on the chain, pressing against her tusk. Metal shrieked. Blue sparks burst around her face. The Synod priest stumbled as their tuning rods flickered. Vor shouted, "Hold her!" But Zhara was no longer fighting to escape. She was pulling the chain, deeper against the golden tusk. Tavren realized what she was doing. "She's going to break it herself," he said. Zhara's voice came, rough and quiet through the chains. "Better my choice than theirs." Tavren pushed himself up, dizzy from pain. "No, there's another way." "There isn't. There is always another note," Vor laughed. Beautiful faith. Worthless but beautiful. Tavren looked at the broken chains around the platform, the same chains that had held Zhara, the same metal tuned to silence her, punish her, control her. He listened beneath the screams, beneath the water, beneath the pulsing rods. The chains carried her note, not perfectly, but enough. Tavren grabbed his fallen hammer with his injured hand and nearly blacked out. Mirel ran to him, trying to hold him back. "You can't even grip it." "Then hold the clapper steady," he said. "What clapper?" Tavren pointed at the largest broken chain link near Zhara's feet. That, Mirel understood. Her face went pale, but she nodded. Together they dragged the heavy chain link toward the center of the platform, where the first bell's hanging shadow stretched across the stone. Tavren wrapped wire from his satchel around the link, twisting it with shaking fingers. Every movement tore pain through his wounded hand. Vor turned on the Synod priests. "Stop him!" Air priest lunged. Korrasha's spear took him through the chest before he reached Tavren. The old orc roared, and for the first time her warriors hesitated, not from fear, but confusion. "She is my blood," Korrasha thundered, "and I will not watch another generation be fed to lies." That broke the platform wide open. Orc warriors turned on Synod priests. Human soldiers, shaken by the true memory, lowered their crossbows or aimed them at Vask's guards. Vask screamed orders. But his voice disappeared beneath the rising bell note. Vor charged toward Zhara with the striker blade. Zhara ripped one arm free and caught him by the throat. The chains cut into her skin, but she held him. "Tavren!" she shouted. Mirel lifted the chain link into position. Tavren raised his hammer. He could barely see through the pain. The first bell hung above them, huge and ancient, waiting for the sound that had been denied for 100 years. Zhara opened her mouth. The golden tusk glowed like sunrise under stone. She sang. It was not a song of victory. It was grief. It was mothers calling lost children. It was soldiers realizing they had killed strangers who should have been neighbors. It was every buried apology the war had swallowed. Tavren struck the chain link. The sound was ugly at first, raw, cracked, wounded. Then it joined Zhara's note. The first bell answered. A wave of gold and bronze light blasted through the chamber. The black water shattered into rain. The Synod tuning rods exploded one by one, sending red sparks into the dark. Chains across the platform snapped loose from Zhara and whipped backward toward Vor. His own runes lit up. "No," he breathed. The chains wrapped around his arms, his throat, his mask. He tried to scream, but the sound was pulled into the first bell and crushed flat. The black mask cracked, revealing only fear beneath it. Marshal Vask ran for the tunnel. His own soldiers did not follow. The chamber ceiling split with thunder. Sand from the dead desert above poured down like a golden storm. Tavren collapsed, but Zhara caught him before he hit the stone. For a moment, their faces were close, both covered in dust, blood, and bell light. "You found the other note," she whispered. Tavren tried to smile. "You sang it." Behind them, humans and orcs stood weaponless, staring at the true memories burning across the walls. Then the first bell rang one final time, and every war bell in the underworld went silent. Silence did not feel peaceful at first. It felt wrong. For 100 years, Rootfall had lived beneath bells. Warning bells, war bells, funeral bells, bells for raids, bells for poison winds, bells for missing children, bells for soldiers returning in pieces. Every human in the underworld had learned to sleep through metal screams and wake before the third strike. Now there was nothing, only falling sand, only broken chains sliding across stone, only the soft, shocked breathing of enemies who no longer knew what to do with their hands. Tavren lay against Zhara's arm, his wounded hand pressed to his chest. Blood soaked the sleeve of his patched coat. His hammer rested near his knee, bent from the final strike. He tried to lift his fingers and failed. Pain burned through his palm, deep and sharp, but it was distant compared to the look on every face around him. Humans stared at orcs. Orcs stared at humans, not with forgiveness. Not yet, with confusion, with shame, with the terrible weight of truth. Across the chamber walls, the first bell still held the final memories in trembling gold. Human envoys and orc elders dying side by side. Synod priests planting false banners. Children on both sides being taught different versions of the same wound. The first lie. The first revenge. The first bell rung for a war that should never have begun. A human soldier dropped his crossbow. The sound cracked across the platform. An orc warrior answered by lowering his axe. Then another weapon fell. Then another. Soon the chamber was filled with the dull, heavy sound of blades, spears, hand bows hitting stone. Marshal Vask stood at the edge of the tunnel, frozen. His face had lost all command. The soldiers who once obeyed his every order now stared at him as if seeing a stranger wearing their leader's skin. "You fools," he spat. "You think one bell changes blood? You think truth feeds children? The orcs will kill you the moment your backs turn." No one moved. Vask's eyes flicked toward the nearest guard. "Arrest the bell-mender." The guard did not raise his weapon. Vask backed away, fury twisting his mouth. "Then die with them." He turned and ran into the eastern passage. 3 steps later, the tunnel ceiling collapsed. Stone, sand, and shattered crystal swallowed him without a scream. No one cheered. That silence was worse than judgment. Zhara slowly lowered Tavren onto the platform. Her broken chains had fallen away, but deep blue burns circled her wrists and throat. Her golden tusk still shone, though dimmer now, scarred with a dark line where she had bitten the chain. She touched it once and her fingers trembled. Tavren saw the movement. "Does it hurt?" She looked down at him. "Everything hurts." He gave a weak breath that almost became a laugh. "Good. Then we're both alive." Her face softened, but only for a moment. Around them, too many eyes were watching. Too many dead were still lying beneath old lies. Mirelle pushed through the crowd and dropped beside Tavren. Her glow lantern was cracked, her cheek was bruised, and her hands shook as she wrapped cloth around his wound. "You idiot," she whispered, tears bright in her eyes. "You hit the first bell with a broken hand." Tavren winced. "It was not broken when I started. It is now." Zhara looked at the injury and guilt moved across her face. "He did it for me." Mirelle tightened the bandage. "No, he did it because he is Tavren. He fixes things even when they cut him open." Grandmother Korrasha approached slowly. Every orc warrior moved aside. The old general's bone armor no longer looked fearsome. It looked heavy. The dead bells tied across her chest hung still, each one a trophy of hatred she could no longer defend. She stopped before Zhara, her iron-capped tusks lowered. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Korrasha removed one of the dead human bells from her armor. She placed it on the platform between them, then another, then another. By the time she finished, her chest was bare of trophies. "I wore their silence," Korrasha said, voice rough, "and called it honor." Zhara's jaw tightened. "You came to kill me." "I came to kill the peace before it could shame me." The old orc's eyes glistened, but she did not look away. "And it has." Zhara stared at her grandmother with years of fear, anger, and loneliness trapped behind her eyes. Tavren expected forgiveness. It did not come, not fully. Zhara only said, "Then live long enough to repair what you broke." Korrasha bowed her head, not to a queen, not to a weapon, to her granddaughter. Across the chamber, human captains began cutting orc prisoners free from transport chains. Orc warriors lifted wounded humans away from unstable stone. Some did it with stiff faces and bitter eyes. Some could not look at each other at all, but they did it. The first bell had not made them good. It had only made denial impossible. Above them, the ceiling crack widened. The dead desert poured sunlight into the underworld for the first time in generations. It came thin at first, a pale blade of morning through dust, then wider, warmer. Gold spread across the flooded floor, across broken tuning rods, across the shattered black mask of Vor the Chain Priest. Zhara looked up. The sunlight touched her parrot-green skin, and caught on her scarred golden tusk. For one breath, she looked young. Not like a prisoner, not like an ancient key, not like the last bearer of a dying accord, just a wounded girl standing beneath a sky she had almost never seen. Tavren followed her gaze. He had lived underground his whole life. He knew the shapes of roots better than clouds, the color of forge fire better than dawn. But now sunlight reached his face, warm and real, and he understood why old stories called it a blessing. Weeks passed before Rootfall trusted the silence. The bells remained still, but the city did not. Human families gathered at bridge edges to watch orc delegations enter without chains. Orc children touched Rootfall's wooden walkways with cautious wonder. The first peace council met in the repaired Belforge because neither side trusted a palace. Tavren could no longer work as he once had. His injured hand healed twisted, his grip weak and painful. The city offered him medals, coin, even a commander's title. He refused all of it. Instead, he asked for the old forge beneath Rootfall there. He and Zhara built something stranger than a monument. They built a school of sound. Human bellmakers learned orc oath songs. Orc tusk-seers learned human warning codes. Mirel became the first lamp runner to guide children from both peoples through the safe tunnels, teaching them where the old lies had been buried and where the new bridges began. Some nights, anger still returned. Some families refused peace. Some warriors vanished into deeper tunnels, unable to live without enemies. Some humans spat when Zhara passed. Some orcs called her golden tusk a curse. Peace did not arrive like a sunrise. It arrived like a wound closing slowly. 1 year after the first bell rang, Tavren climbed with Zhara to the cracked desert opening above Rootfall. His hand ached in the cold air. Her golden tusk glowed faintly in the dawn. Below them, the underworld waited in fragile quiet. Zhara stood beside him, strong and scarred. Her broken chains melted into a small bronze bell hanging at her belt. "Do you regret finding me?" she asked. Tavren looked at the sunlight spilling over the desert, then at the city roots glowing beneath their feet. "No," he said, "but I regret how long the world waited to hear you." Zhara did not smile, but she took his damaged hand carefully in hers. Far below, the first bell rang once, not as a warning, not as a funeral, not as war, as a promise. And this time, both humans and orcs listened.